17-16 ठीक है, कर दो, करो करो। Okay, so hello everybody, good morning. By the way, good afternoon. Okay, so welcome to the EduphoreIAS, the Hindu live class. And we are starting with the first, as usual, from the yesterday's questions. Fine, the two questions that you were given actually, one for the prelims and the other for the mains. Fine. So let us start with this first. So first question, consider the following statements. And number one statement is about 275 bird species counted during survey at Corbett Tiger Reserve. Second statement, Jim Corbett National Park is located in Uttarakhand state. And third is red-headed vulture is considered as endangered under IUCN Red List. Now, I hope many of you have marked this question as correct because we discussed this article yesterday, the smaller one on the states page, and I said that please do not skip the states page without even having a cursory look at it. Fine, because at times you find such kind of facts, figures which might be important or which indeed is important from the प्रीलिम्स एग्जाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू. ठीक है, सो इसलिए आपने स्किप नहीं करना. ये नहीं कि सोच लिया कि 3 तो स्टेट्स के पेज आते हैं तो चलो जी उसको रहने दो, ऐसा नहीं करना कभी भी. फाइन. सो व्हाट इज द करेक्ट आंसर हियर? यस्टरडे अगर आप रिकॉल कर पाओ तो वी डिस्कस दैट रेड हेडेड वल्चर एंड प्लस व्हाइट हेडेड वल्चर both has both have the status under IUCN Red List as not endangered but critically endangered. Fine, critically endangered. So therefore, statement 3 is wrong here. Means first is correct, second is indeed Jim Corbett National Park is in Uttarakhand itself. So therefore, only 2 pairs are correct for this question, that is answer B. Fine. Second question. That is, the state-affiliated universities and colleges should be hubs for skill-based science education that aligns with employability in the scientific sector. You need to comment over these statements and you had to write this in 150 words for 10 marker. Fine. So yesterday we discussed an article related to reimagining the role of state universities in science education. Fine. And therefore, again following the same principle of writing the answer, that is IBC rule, you can say intro, body and conclusion. Fine. So how you can introduce this? So introduction could not be better than what exactly the introductory paragraphs of the article itself. So here you mention this, you start on the new education policy line. For example, by the 3rd anniversary of the National Education Policy 2020, experts and policy makers have lauded its efforts to foster skill-based education and practical learning. Fine. This is how, or from you can in 2-3 lines, because the question is for 10 marks only, so you can mention around 3 lines of your statement, this introduction. Fine. Apart from that, in the body part, you just need to mention the data facts little bit. And for example, among STEM graduates, that is this science, technology, engineering and mathematics, the aggregate enrollment of students in BSc course is close to 50 lakh, with more than 11 lakh students completing their degrees every year. However, the number of science graduates drops to 2.9 lakh at the master level, and this further drops actually to the level of, let us say, 6,000 for the doctoral or the PhD, this science PhD that is being awarded in India every year. Fine. So this is how you can mention the things in you are playing with both the data facts as well as the, means you are painting this, the correct picture, let us say. Fine. And this was mentioned, this figure is authentic one. Always try to use the authentic figures, and this figure was given by All India Higher Education Survey. Fine. Further, you can make that out of 1 1113, that is 1113 colleges, universities, in fact not colleges, in India 422 are public universities, that is managed by the state governments. Fine. State managed universities and their constituent units account for the single largest share of the enrollment across the universities in India, and science courses host the second highest number of students after arts or the humanities. State level science education is a fertile training ground, in the next point, to prepare graduates for the national scientific workforce. So these would be 3 to 5 5 points of your somewhat this body of your answer. And then further you can continue with the same, that is, state affiliated universities and colleges should be hubs for skill based science education with teaching, training and research that aligns with employability in the scientific sector. This is how, on the positive or the affirmative note, you can conclude your answer. Fine. So this should be the this can be the one of the conclusions. Fine. Fine. And further you can give the way forward or the solution. For example, the BSc or integrated course curricula could focus on industry relevant skills and certification programs such as programming, data analysis, techniques, instrumentation and facility expertise, quality assurance and benchmarking. So this should be the way forward, moving forward from here. Fine. So this is how you can conclude your answer on the positive note or affirmative tone. Fine. So this completes your IBC, intro, body and conclusion. For 10 marker, that is sufficient. Fine. Just need to write at most 2 pages, fine, of your A4 sheet, taking the margins into account as well. Okay. So that's it as far as your yesterday's questions are concerned. Let us start with the today's Hindu. There are lots of stuff in today's Hindu. Fine. Okay. So starting with the cover page of the today's Hindu, the date is 17th of August, and we are starting with the front page. So this is your front page, and here we have cabinet nod for 10,000 electric buses in 169 cities. The focus of the government is on e-mobility, because we are facing lots of issues related to the climate change and all. So therefore focus जो है सरकार की, that is on e-mobility, fine, green transition, fine. But उसके लिए we need a lot of amounts to invest over infrastructure, and वो तभी possible है जब government, central government lead ले और कुछ subsidies provide करे states को. So there is this new scheme called, you can say, PM e-bus Seva scheme, fine, which has an estimated budget of this much crore, 57,613 crores, of which the center will be providing 20,000 crore as subsidies, fine, to 181 cities without organized bus services will get green mobility infrastructure, fine. So green infrastructure, for example, kahin pe agar there are this scheme is going to be implemented in stages. Let us say in the first stage it will be implemented more or less in cities where not even basic facilities are let us say available. So you can see this is for across the country to shore up urban infrastructure under green mobility initiative with a focus on cities having no organized bus services. Fine. E-bus kya hai? So e-bus is any bus whose propulsion and accessory systems are powered exclusively by zero emission electricity sources. And the whole world wants to be net zero by 2050, 2070, let us say. Variation is there between the developed and developing nations, and we too want to be declared as net zero by 2070. So net zero means emission जो है वो न्यूट्रल करना पड़ेगा कि जितना हम रिलीज कर रहे हैं कार्बन उतनी हम एब्जॉर्ब भी कर पाए कार्बन सिंक्स के थ्रू. ठीक है. तो उसके लिए बेहद जरूरी है कि हम ग्रीन मोबिलिटी की तरफ शिफ्ट करें, ट्रांजिशन करें, राइट. एंड फॉर दैट मैटर this scheme will go a long way in making India net zero. It will support bus operations for 10 years. The scheme will be implemented in 2 segments. Fine. In the first segment, For cities in the first segment, depot infrastructure will also be developed or upgraded to support the new e-buses. Depot, that is bus depot or bus stand to say, fine. So first segment में जहाँ पे ये facilities नहीं है उनको upgrade किया जाएगा या develop किया जाएगा. For the second segment, the initiative will focus on bus priority infrastructure, multi-modal interchange facilities, automated fare collection systems, and charging infra as well. That's must. If you want to have green transition, then of course we need to have this charging infrastructure as well, isn't it? So therefore, a very good scheme or initiative, you can say, undertaken by the central government. And Supreme Court has unveiled yesterday a handbook to eliminate gender stereotypes from law. There are certain wordings, which Supreme Court, these handbooks prohibit from using their uses in, especially in the judiciary or in the judgments. And what are these words? So, career women, fallen women, faithful or obedient wife, if teasing, and hermaphrodite. Fine. Hermaphrodite means a person, animal, or anything having an organism having both the kind of gametes, male and female. ठीक है. So therefore these are the words which Supreme Court wants to be prohibited from uses, their uses especially in the judgments or in judiciary. Fine. And therefore the 30-page handbook on combating gender stereotypes aims to free the judiciary and the legal community from the mechanical application of gender stereotypical languages in the judgments or orders and court pleadings. Fine. And these words to be replaced by, instead of using words like women, wife, street sexual harassment, intersexes, these kind of words, these should be replaced by these new words. Fine. So this is a good initiative, you can say, again on the part of the Supreme Court itself. You can use this fodder or material for your social justice related kind of things as well, whenever you are covering social justice related topics. Okay. Okay, that's it from the front page. Next we have city page from Delhi, since this newspaper is a Delhi edition. Fine. So from Delhi, I have said those who are this states. Before that we have city page as well. I think something, okay, might be in the next page. Order has been changed today. So from here you have a states page. So states more or less you see the politics. So but dekhna hai, you need to have a cursory look, because at times you get some information here which can be important from the exam point of view as well. Okay. So okay. So here comes your city page. The order of page has been rearranged today. Fine. So city page from Delhi. So those of you who are joining this from class from the Delhi, you need to have a look at this page, because you need to be aware citizen as well at the same time. Fine. Apart from that, again the city page itself. So the conflict or tiff is going on between Delhi LG and the elected government. Okay. Not that relevant kind of things for here, from here on this page. Chalo, next देखते हैं quickly, and here comes your editorial. Editorials as दोनों ही articles काफी important हैं. And first is an act to cement digital authoritarianism. So finally जो DPDP आपका bill है, that is digital personal and data protection act. In fact जो bill pass किया था parliament ने, finally act बन चुका है 2023, and therefore you can see the title of this article itself, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, or in short it can be said as Data Act. Fine. So this whole article revolves around this act. The foundation is this act itself, and therefore the author here, you can see, आपको टाइटल पढ़ के आइडिया लग जाना चाहिए कि किस टाइप का ये आर्टिकल है. एन एक्ट टू सीमेंट डिजिटल अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म. दो हमें टोटली ऑन द फेस ऑफ इट इस आर्टिकल को नहीं लेना है कि जो लिखा है ऑथर ने सब कुछ अच्छा ही है, बट देयर आर सर्टेन एग्जांपल्स जहाँ पे आपकी whenever you talk about being neutral in your stance, fine, in your writings, तो न्यूट्रलिटी को आप प्रैक्टिस तब कर सकते हो जब आपको प्रोज भी पता हो एंड कॉन्स भी पता हो. फाइन. So this article more or less talks about the disadvantages or the cons, you can say, or the negative points, fine, more or less the critic. This article has been written from a critic angle to this act, fine. So let us quickly have a look at this. Okay. So firstly, starting from the right to privacy judgment of 2017 itself, he is giving a good augury that you may say that you want to be forgotten, but the state does not want to forget you. Fine. So this chilling argument for dominance over every Indian's life was rejected 6 years ago in August 2017 by the Supreme Court of India in the first Puttaswamy decision. So Puttaswamy, that is Justice K.S. Puttaswamy, retired judge of Supreme Court itself, Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. So the case which came before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court in its 2017 judgment in this particular case Puttaswamy, this case is famous as the right to privacy case. Fine. In this very case, in its judgment, Supreme Court underlined that right to privacy is one of the fundamental rights, fine, which cannot be violated by the state, that is the government here. Fine. So the court reaffirmed the fundamental right to privacy while requiring the union government to introduce a data protection law in parliament as per this judgment, means as per the 2017 judgment of Supreme Court, that is right to privacy judgment or the case Puttaswamy judgment. Fine. So this is what actually the court expected from the government. So he is saying instead in 2023 the country has now got the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, or in short the Data Act itself. So see, this is how we can write, I mean we can take a clue from here. This is how you can introduce, write your answers, you can write your this essay as well, because in the 4-5 lines he is mentioning that from where the things actually started related to the data protection bill or act, हमें ज़रूरत है क्यों पड़ी इस चीज़ की. Fine. So the whole this why part lies in the 2017 judgment itself, that is right to privacy. Fine. So in order to safeguard the citizens' right to this privacy in the digital era that we are living today, therefore it is it should be the duty of the government or the state to bring such kind of acts in order to protect the citizens. Okay. So there are two things, its provisions. He is mentioning about the provisions of this act. So according to Amrita Jori and Anjali Bhardwaj, the two people, they are saying that this very act, that is Digital Act or Data Act in short, threatens the very foundations of transparency and accountability. Another person, that is a Professor Shubhashish Banerjee from IIT Delhi, says it facilitates data collection and processing by the government and private entities rather than data protection itself. When this bill was actually introduced and passed, we discussed, as the news, kept evolving. But of course, we'll be discussing this act in our current affairs class in detail. Fine. Let us restrict ourselves here to the article itself. Fine. Making Indians stand in line. So why did the Data Act take this shape after all? So the answer rests in total state control, and that is called authoritarianism, where you have total state control. Fine. A digital leash to yank us and make us stand in line, then serve the preambular objectives of the Constitution of India. Preamble related objectives. Fine. So he is now citing the 2015 statement of Prime Minister that when inaugurating the Digital India program in July 2015, Prime Minister said, who was in Silicon Valley in September 2015, announced that the technology is advancing citizens' empowerment and democracy that once drew their strength from the constitutions. Fine. So technology, Prime Minister said that technology actually empowering not just the citizens but also democracy, which actually at a point of time used to derive its strength from the constitutions. Fine. So he is saying the speech reveals itself a misplaced belief in the curative powers of the techno solutionism. ये सारी चीजें हम solution जो देख रहे हैं of every problem that lies in techno solution, means technology as a solution to the problems. and that all our problems will be fixed by the digital revolution rather than a transformative constitution. So he is saying rather the focus of the Prime Minister has more or less been on the digital revolution than the constitutionalism itself or the constitution itself. Fine. So he is saying it is most visible in the digital public goods built with vast state resources in the personal data of every citizen. Further, he underlines that technology requires a continuous expansion of a state power that is the result of tie-up between two things, surveillance capital and surveillance welfare. ठीक है कि वेलफेयर हो या कैपिटल, दोनों ही सेंस में सर्विलांस जो है वो स्टेट आपके ऊपर रखेगी. ठीक है. सो एंड दिस can be better reflected in the public goods built with vast state resources and personal data of every citizen. Fine. He is giving an example of आरोग्य सेतु ऐप. हम सब ने यूज किया था ड्यूरिंग कोरोना पैंडेमिक. फाइन. तो एग्जांपल क्या है कि अकॉर्डिंग टू MIT, दैट इज मैसाचुसेट्स इन दिस इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, रिव्यूज कोविड ट्रेसिंग ट्रैकर. India is the only democracy to make its contact tracing app mandatory. Neither the privacy policy nor the terms of service for the app were publicly accessible. Though this was called as digital public good because everybody could use this, Arogya Setu for, contact tracing purpose कि उनको कोविड का वायरस जो है उनके तक ना पहुंचे या कोई नियर बाय उनके नेबरहुड में कोई है विद इन द डिफाइंड मीटर्स, तो पहले से आपको पता लग जाए कि हाँ यहाँ पे कोई बंदा है जिसको ऑलरेडी कोविड हो चुका है, सो दैट यू कैन टेक केयर ऑफ योरसेल्फ. तो आरोग्य सेतु के बारे में ये कहा MIT के MIT ने कि इंडिया इज द ओनली डेमोक्रेसी टू मेक इट्स कॉन्टैक्ट ट्रेसिंग ऐप मैंडेटरी. Being a public good, it was made mandatory. Being a democratic country, it was made mandatory. Neither the privacy policy nor the terms of service for the app were publicly accessible actually. Fine. So what kind of a public good it is, or what kind of democracy it is serving actually. Yes, due to outrage, these were added later, but the same issue re-emerged with the online vaccination platform CoWIN, जहां से आप लोग सर्टिफिकेट्स डाउनलोड करते थे, सब लोग, हम लोग भी. फाइन. कोविन पे जाके हम अपने डिजिटल सर्टिफिकेट्स डाउनलोड करते थे रिलेटेड टू, और रजिस्ट्रेशन भी करते थे फॉर व्हाट पर्पस, फॉर वैक्सीनेशन. फाइन. So Indians need to ask themselves to answer this question honestly. Did you install Arogya Setu to travel or enter a building, or did you use it as a reliable method to avoid infection? So he is putting the question to the citizen itself. You need to ask yourself for what good reason or what good purpose you actually use this app. Fine. So quite simply, the state views data protection as being a nuisance to its digital programs, which is inherent in their architectural design. So he is saying that whatever design government is coming up in this digital arena, somewhere the architectural design itself is a kind of built up on such a this design which somewhere where the state views the data protection of citizens as being nuisance, fine, and rather use it as a surveillance tool. For example, another example, the Smart Cities Mission, which at its heart requires an integrated command and control center, integrated command and control ICCC, command and control center, which actually takes care of all the, let us say, for example, for traffic. So there we are having an integrated command and control center regulating the whole traffic of a city, fine, managing, for example, even in Chandigarh, you can see that, to gather real-time data of residents and pull it in a databases. But it has missed two deadlines. Now it has been extended by 3 years to June 2024. Indians need to answer this question honestly. While there are more cameras that watch you and LED strips on the roads and metro stations, do our cities feel any safer or smarter? So another question he is posing to us. Even after having such kind of LED, let us say, strips and there's lots of cameras, so whether we feel more safer today or not, then actually they were not there. Then there are more direct measures for mass surveillance that dispense with any camouflage. For example, another example are the tender in 2018 for social media communications hub, which wanted to create a 360-degree view over your social media accounts for molding nationalistic feelings. Fine. So he is giving this another example, that is a third example. So through various examples, he is somewhere, substantiating his point or what he is mentioning, an act to cement digital authoritarianism or surveillance over your data by the state itself. So totally negative, totally criticism. अगर आपको कोई critic against a cons चाहिए related to this act, this article is full of that. Fine. Just need to take away main important points, not everything. Fine. So this is, then he is giving another example of a tender that was related to June 28, 2019 to build a national automated facial recognition system as the world's largest facial recognition system, that instead of having this biometric, let us now use the iris scan system. Fine. For example, on airports, so for security clearances, you can use the this facial kind of recognition system. Fine. In one way or other, all these projects are granted legal sanctity through exceptions under the Data Act. So now he is saying कि this जो Data Act अभी का आया है, जो एक्ट बन चुका है, फाइन, DPDP एक्ट की बात कर रहे हैं हम, that is actually giving exemptions to all these examples or kind of things that we have discussed. Fine. Rather than protecting the ordinary citizens, the act prescribes duties such as not to suppress any material information while providing her personal data for any document. So this is another point of criticism. He is saying कि somewhat instead of protecting the data of the citizens or the privacy of the citizens, act जो है ये prescribe करता है, ये कोई भी suppress नहीं करेगा या hide नहीं करेगा any material information, fine, while providing her personal data for any documentation or document verification. Fine. And further, not only this, but also अगर आप छुपाते हो कोई information, relevant information, fine, उसके लिए आपको पेनल्टी भी इम्पोज की गई है. सो इट imposes fines up to 10,000 on at risk groups of religious, caste, gender and sexual minorities that might provide incomplete or incorrect information for their personal safety. Fine. So हो सकता है कि personal, for example, sexual minorities, fine, or LGBT communities, so for their personal protection they might give false information, but in that case they might be imposed with 10,000 of fines. Fine. So another point of criticism. Now thinking by the government, he is saying ki what the government thinks actually on this. So according to the government, there is a scaremongering in the country. Scaremongering kind of rumor is actually, we are spreading a rumor. Instead, we should trust it with our privacy, as the Data Act is a new social contract to participate in a digital society. So given the vague nature of the Data Act, it will appeal more to partisan than a constitutionalist, since trust is based on allegiance of a favored political ideology than a rights-based law. So he is saying that given the vague nature of this Data Act, this act would be favored by someone having partisan attitude or favorable this ideology with the present government. Then a constitutionalist or a let us say, who is having belief more in the Constitution of India rather than the current establishment or the current government. Also been argued that with experience, the Data Act will improve over time. So this is again a vague term. With experience, the Data Protection Act will improve over time. This is a magical thinking, as it ignores the democratic backsliding in digital India. Fine. So several recent pieces of legislation creates databases that fit an authoritarian frame containing the intimate details of Indians and their family units. Another example he is giving of certain laws where the government is actually creating databases that is related to the intimate details of Indians and their families. This includes the Criminal Procedure Identification Act 2022, Criminal Procedure Identification Act 2022 that has been made into law as per Project 39A. It creates databases unnecessary while also infringing on the fundamental rights. More recently, another act which has been passed during this monsoon session only. So the Registration of Births and Deaths Act 2023 builds a national database seeded with Aadhaar, which means data sharing literally from cradle to pyre. Okay? तो इस पे भी ये क्वेश्चन मार्क उठा रहे हैं, इसको भी क्रिटिसाइज कर रहे हैं, जो कि इसी मॉनसून सेशन में ये पास हुआ था बिल एंड फाइनली एक्ट भी बन चुका है। ठीक है कि दिस इज अनदर एंड it means that your data sharing has become literally from cradle to pyre because this has been linked with your Aadhaar. So it is clear from a map of government projects, policies and laws that all things leads to a data act as the destination for total state control. And authoritarianism is nothing but concentration of authority, you can say, or total state control. So all these examples, whatever he mentioned, is saying this, all these pointing towards a single uniform destination, and that is the total state control. Means the focus of the government of the state is to have absolute control over the lives of the citizens, including their personal lives. Fine. For example, this tight clasp over our smartphones is incomplete without the private sector. So he is saying that this is not possible what government is doing without private sector. So even private sector is in nexus with the government, you can say. So there is also the financial objective to this as well. For the digital sector to contribute a fifth to the ambitious $5 trillion economy target by 2023, as has been mentioned by the economic survey for this year, this may be achieved by even having the government selling our data. Fine. तो अगर डेटा हमारी बेचना शुरू कर दे सरकार, क्योंकि वी आर सेइंग द डेटा इज द न्यू ऑयल, मींस न्यू रिसोर्स एक्चुअली, फाइन, इंपॉर्टेंट रिसोर्स। तो इसलिए अगर डेटा भी बेचना शुरू कर दे लोगों की डेटा सरकार, तो ये टारगेट शायद मीट हो जाए ऑफ $5 trillion. So it is a mistake to term the data acts as a light touch regulation, as it provides for vast yet vague ministerial discretion. So इस डेटा इस डेटा एक्ट के अंदर there are certain exemptions has been given to the various ministries. So he is underlining this again as a this again can be the point of criticism. ठीक है कि कहीं ना कहीं and all this relates to the vagueness of this act itself. The union government can exempt. So what are the exemptions? So there are certain examples for that as well. The union government under this data act can exempt a single company or a class of companies from compliances or suo motu file a complaint against them to a data protection board of India that it constitutes and controls. Now see the irony here कि सरकार जो है, यूनियन गवर्नमेंट जो है, वो एग्जेम्पशन दे सकती है एक कंपनी को या क्लास ऑफ कंपनीज को फ्रॉम कंप्लायंसिंग विद this provisions of this act itself. Fine. Or in another instance, other hand, it can also file a suo motu case or complaint against these same companies to a data protection board of India that has been mandated under this act itself, that actually, and this data protection board of India will be constituted and the members will be appointed and controlled by the government itself. Fine. So it's a kind of irony. आप उसको कंप्लेंट रजिस्टर करा रहे हो जिसको आप खुद अपॉइंट कर रहे हो. So of course the people will listen you only, isn't it? So related to questioning the autonomy of Data Board of India itself, further inspiration seems to have been drawn from the National Intelligence Law of China, where it can now demand any such information as it may call for. तो कहते हैं कि कहीं ना कहीं फर्दर इंस्पिरेशन जो है इस लॉ के लिए, इस एक्ट के लिए, वो ड्रॉ की गई है फ्रॉम द चाइनीज लॉ, एंड दैट इज National Intelligence Law of China. China is a communist country, so there it is mentioned that China can demand any such information from its citizens as it may call for. So he is labeling this to our act with this same National Intelligence Law of China. So this is another point of criticism, you can say, because we are a democratic nation. We should not ask every data from the citizens. So companies will fear a government that can pick winners and losers in India's digital market, because government can even file suo motu complaint with the Digital Board of India that we discuss. Fine. Again, these follow a path of centralized state command where industrial concentration has alarmed former RBI, Reserve Bank of India Deputy Governor Viral Acharya and economist Nouriel Roubini, who warns against the select firms as the national champions. कि कुछ selected companies या firms हैं, उनको आप promote कर रहे हो, encourage कर रहे हो, and looking to them towards them as they are, or these are the national champions. Fine. It has been warned by the two respected these persons. While a set of giant private companies may risk economic growth for the state, having fewer firms will be easier to control. These developments coincide with a fall in global rankings for economic liberty by conservative centers such as the Cato Institute's Human Freedom Index, the Heritage Foundation, and the Hudson Institute. So he is relating this to, or coinciding, he is saying that this somewhere on the one hand we are coming up with the Data Protection Act, on the other hand we are backsliding on such kind of freedom indices, fine, released by these houses. So a warning to heed, warning जिस पे कि विचार करने की जरूरत है, that is where does it leave the citizens of India? In September 2018, fine, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, who is current CJI, in his dissenting judgment drew from Nobel Prize winning author Alexander Solzhenitsyn's experience in Stalinist Russia, Stalin के टाइम की बात कर रहे हैं. He quotes that the invisible threads of society network on a biometric data had grave portents for the future, and unless the law mandates an effective data protection framework, the quest for liberty and dignity would be as ephemeral as the wind. Ephemeral is something short-lived. Fine. So this was the warning actually he is talking about, given by the then, of course, dissenting judgment by the D.Y. Chandrachud, the current Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, who is the current CJI, Chief Justice of India, in 2018. We are talking about. So, incremental amendments or specific rule making when in isolation will not actually decrease state coercion, as this law is only a symptom of deeper civic rot. India requires a wider constitutional reboots on digital authoritarianism. So, he is saying that all has not been, somewhere, he's not, somewhere in favor of the current set of act or current provisions of this act. So he's saying that somewhere India requires a wider constitutional reboot rather, fine, on digital authoritarianism, that is total state control or concentration of power, especially in the domain of digitalization or digital domain in the hands of the government. Fine. So this is the complete article, important one, but more or less this article has been written in a critic form. Fine, means criticizing this act itself. Next is new bills and principled course for criminal reforms. So this article is also related to the three new bills that has been proposed actually going to replace the Macaulay's era, this criminal jurisprudence, or you can say the act itself. For example, Indian Penal Code, the three codes. So the recent introduction to three bills transforming India's criminal laws, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita to replace the Indian Penal Code, the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita to replace the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the Bharatiya Sakshi Bill. Sakshi is what? Evidence. So Sakshi Bill is to replace the Indian Evidence Act of the British era. So these three acts actually going to be replaced with the three new Hindi, you can say, acts or reformed acts, has ignited a spectrum of reactions amidst what is unfolding. The challenge lies in ensuring that there is a debate which also leads to productive contributions. बिल्कुल ठीक बात है कि debates होनी चाहिए, and in fact for debate purpose only the government has sent these three bills to the select committee of the parliament so that we could have a wider deliberations and debates over these bills. So therefore government has just introduced but not yet passed these three bills in this session. Fine, that monsoon session. So hopefully we'll see the passing of these three bills becoming act in the upcoming winter session. Okay, so the principles of criminal law in Alan Norey's words are a site of a struggle and contradictions. Capturing the collective public aspiration within the criminal law reforms presents a formidable challenge. In fact, of course, bringing reforms in criminal law at times seems like a formidable challenge. And that's why it has taken this much of years that we could not replace these, archaic laws that was, of course, that were passed by or brought by the Britishers. Fine, way back. For example, Indian Penal Code is of 1860, long way back. So the disparities between the polarized popular opinions must be balanced with the state's perspective. So he is focusing on the polarized popular opinions versus the state's perspective. criminal law is an instrument of social control. It molds and guides us in more ways than one. The conditioning of stakeholders and functionaries of the Macaulay era criminal law for 163 years undeniably complicates the task of criminal law reforms. Okay? So 163 years old laws that we are currently using. So it is too early to decide whether the bills will cause large scale reforms or changes in the legal landscape. The success or failure of the criminal law reforms in the form of 3 bills hinges on their inception, formulation, resilience, and far-sightedness. Fine. So he is leaving these to the success or failure of these bills upon these pillars. So some reformatory measures. At the same time, the assertion that these bills are draconian when compared to their previous iterations lacks merit. कहते हैं कि जो लोग ये कह रहे हैं कि ये बिल्स जो हैं, ऑफ कोर्स अपोजिशन वाले यही कह रहे हैं कि जो ये बिल्स हैं, अपोजिशन पार्टीज हैं, मेंबर्स ये कहते हैं कि ये जो न्यूज़ लेके आई है सरकार रिप्लेस करने के लिए ओल्डर जो एक्ट्स हैं उनको, कहीं ना कहीं ये ड्रैकोनियन है अपने आप में, क्योंकि सरकार ने कुछ नहीं किया. इट्स लाइक old wine in new bottle. Fine. So among others, the bills exhibit moderative modification fostering gender inclusivity and replacement of anachronistic terms such as unsoundness of mind को replace कर रहा with mental illness. So author is somewhat positive in his tone. So जो भी है bad and good दोनों को ही mention कर रहे हैं. There is also a major reconfiguration in punishment for minor and serious offenses. Significantly, the integration of information and communication. So there are modification yet, of course, for minor offenses as well. ठीक है, उसके लिए भी, for example, अब कुछ heinous crimes and severe crimes like rapes and all, उसमें 10 years की provision की गई है for even की life imprisonment kind of things as well. And now it has been under this new bills, it has been mentioned that, of course, it will be considered as an act of let us say death. Fine. So that's good. So technology application with the criminal justice process is noteworthy. So again technology को center में रखा गया है. Although limited, innovations such as trial in absentia and the introduction of community services are commendable. So these are the pros or the positives of this act, this bills actually. But the exclusion of the attempted suicide and adultery aligns the black letter of the law with the Supreme Court of India's decisions. ठीक है. So of course Supreme Court ने adultery को null and void declare कर दिया था, even attempt to suicide. So this has been excluded from this act as well. The offences of sedition, Rajdroh, so has been judiciously tempered through the introduction of culpability constraints. That is proving that you have not done something wrong. Newly created offences such as terrorism, organized crime, and mob lynching and negligent acts to add novel dimensions to these very bills, the 3 bills. Fine. So these are the new changes that actually government intend to bring through these 3 new bills. Okay. Now the test. So there are various tests or debates centered on. So he is giving certain suggestions as well. The debate on the bill should not revolve merely around ascertaining positive or negative outcomes. Instead, the pivotal concern lies in ascertaining whether the fundamental tenets of criminal jurisprudence have been upheld throughout this process or not. So he is saying in place of just focusing on the pros and cons of these bills, let us focus more on the fundamental principle of criminal jurisprudence. Jurisprudence is basically the theory of law. You can say the study of law have been upheld throughout this process or not. So whether jurisprudence, criminal jurisprudence especially, whether this has been upheld or not, so that should be more focus. The trajectory of the reforms and their operational dynamics remain uncertain here. Fine. So this is again after pros, now you can see you have cons. Nonetheless, the principled foundation of criminal laws can be examined methodically. Okay. So the primary principle for such adjudication remains. Now 1, 2, 3, 4, he is giving the solutions. So primary principle for such adjudication remains the extent to which the reforms address the needs and concerns for those impacted by criminal justice, especially the realization of fundamental and statutory rights. So first should be, the focus should be on those who are actually going to be impacted through these bills. Second, following the principles of criminalization in creating new offenses is equally pertinent. Fine. So here he is talking about creating certain principles in criminalization itself. Then third, suggesting criminal laws in this country further class divides as the rich and the resourceful get, of course, आपने देखा होगा जल्दी बेल मिल जाती है जिनके पास resources हैं, and they get the better access to justice when compared to the marginalized or the poor and vulnerable. Therefore, the principles of equality and equitability become essential checks on criminal law reform. So इसका भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए. Equality means everybody is equal before law. Equitability means, treating everyone with, let us say, with fairness, justice, and fine. So equitable, in an equitable manner, treating everyone in an equitable manner. Fine. So this is another suggestion. Now the fourth one is, it is fallacious to assume without conclusive evidence to the contrary that the populace opposes stringent measures against the terrorist or organized criminals. Fine. तो कहते हैं कि ये भी somewhat fallacious has to assume कि जो populace है, population basically opposing stringent measures against terrorists or organized criminals. So against, there should be stringent measures against such kind of crimes. At the same time, increasing severity in laws does not ipso facto instill public confidence in the criminal justice system. ये कह रहे हैं कि इसका मतलब ये भी नहीं कि आप बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रिक्ट बना दो क्रिमिनल जस्टिस सिस्टम को तो लोगों को ये विश्वास हो जाएगा कि बहुत अच्छा है, फाइन, ये रिफॉर्म बहुत अच्छा है. नो, ipso facto is by the virtue of the very fact itself. ठीक है. So the upcoming bills therefore face a pivotal challenge in bridging the gap between rhetoric and reality. Fine. So this is okay. Finally, the effectiveness of the reforms will also be tested on the basis of its impact upon the status of vulnerable victims and the poor, of course. So in any kind of justice system based criminal justice system, at the center of the any kind of reform should be the vulnerable victims and the poor population, isn't it? Yeah. So therefore, state's power asset. Now he's talking about the state's power. Over the years, the functionaries responsible for its enforcement considerably denuded the essence of criminal law. Fine. So he's blaming the functionaries especially for this denudation. Criminal law remains a strategic power asset for the state. Concepts of risk, endangerment, and dangerousness continue to contaminate the criminal law jurisprudence. As the bills are placed before the select committee for its consideration, it is expected that this committee will allow greater engagement to improve the drafts in terms of language and substance. So this is what he is expecting, and this is what we can also expect from the select committee of the parliament. So the space must be, means the space that committee has got, that the government has not passed this, rather given time for deliberation and discussion over the same, must be utilized to accommodate greater provisions concerning victims' rights and participation, hate crime, bail, sentencing framework, and legal aid in pending bills. So all these should be taken into account, and all this should be discussed in a wider perspective. Bails, rights of victims, participation, and even hate crimes as well. The envisioned criminal law reforms must foster the rule of law and fortify the pursuit of justice. Okay? So this is how you can conclude your, this should be the conclusion kind of, on the affirmative tone or note. ठीक है. So it should foster the rule of law. कल भी हमने बात की थी परसों, इनफैक्ट नू वाले जब हमने आर्टिकल डिस्कस किया था कि रूल ऑफ लॉ होना चाहिए ना कि रूल बाय लॉ. ठीक है. So therefore a very balanced neutral kind of article. The writer itself is a vice chancellor. Yes, National Law University Delhi. So of course he's the right person to actually analyze this the current set of bills. So he is giving legal insights over these bills, actually a good balanced kind of thing that we should discuss, should read and revise. Next is understanding the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, U-turn. So U-turn क्या है? हुआ ये था कि जून मंथ में मिनिस्ट्री ने कहा था कि हम जो नेशनल बॉडीज हैं लाइक NTC, नेशनल टाइगर कंजर्वेशन this authority, then wildlife crime control bureau, then central zoo authority and another कि इन चारों को हम मर्ज कर देंगे. ठीक है, for ease of doing business purpose. ठीक है, ये easy efficiency आए सिस्टम में, implementation में, तो इसलिए मर्जर की बात की थी, बट नाउ इट हैज टेकन द यू टर्न, नॉट गोइंग टू मर्ज एक्चुअली. सो दिस आर्टिकल इज ऑल अबाउट दिस. सो क्या प्लान क्या था अर्लियर? The idea for such reorganization was announced during the COVID-19 lockdown and came under criticism from the activists that it would render key environmental organization toothless. Of course, उनकी autonomy कहीं ना कहीं compromise होगी merge करने से, because now after merger क्या provision था कि merge करने के बाद सारी जो reporting है वो of course ministry के पास जाएगी, ministry ही इनको govern करेगी. तो कहीं ना कहीं autonomy जो है वो पे question mark आ गया था, तो इसलिए इसको activists जो थे वो oppose कर रहे थे. So according to internal documents accessed by application through an RTI Right to Information Act, MOE, this ministry justifies the merger for ease of doing business. Fine. But NTCA itself, fine, National Tiger Conservation Authority, which comes under indirectly, under of course ministry itself, but this body, this NTCA had opposed this merger, saying it could lead to administrative confusion, chaos, and loss of independence, undue interference in the decision making, and loss of focus in discharging duties and responsibilities. So this was opposed none other than the NTCA itself. So what was the ministry's rationale behind this merger? So Giridhar Kulkarni, a Belagaum-based wildlife conservationist, had filed a petition in the Karnataka High Court, arguing that it would amount to a merger of entities and authorities that is actually impermissible in law. तो इसके रिप्लाई में कर्नाटका हाई कोर्ट में मिनिस्ट्री ने ये कहा था कि notification does not amount to merger and that the intention was to get the various authorities to function at 19 regional offices under one roof. Fine, but not exactly the merger, but bringing efficiency in the functioning of 19 regional offices of the ministry located in at different locations across India. So following this assurance, the Karnataka High Court disposed of the petition but gave the petitioner the liberty to approach the court if the merger was found to adversely affect the functioning of these various bodies. Fine. But more than 2 years later, the ministry has dropped the merger plan now, likely owing to the technical and administrative difficulties in merging the institutions in question. Fine. So because of this reasons, technical reasons, the government has dropped the plan of merging these bodies. So what are these bodies? NTCA is Managing Authority of Project Tiger and India's Tiger Reserves. FSI, that is Forest Survey of India. It is FSI. Yes, Forest Survey of India only. Is scientific body that primarily deals with the forest data, as the name itself is Forest Service, so of course deals with the forest. And next is Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, as the name suggests, is an enforcement authority basically related to the wildlife crimes. And the CZA, that is Central Zoo Authority, of course, has purview that is limited to the functioning of the zoos across India. So these are the respective functions of these bodies. So what does the new notification state now? So the same notification of the June also proposes to reorganize existing regional offices, that is 90 regional offices across India. And this idea too has come under criticism because it does not appear to be based on any objective criteria. Okay. Now, how is the ministry changing? So is there an issue with the ministry itself? Broadly, experts articulated a need for disintegrated and dedicated efforts across the board, including to strengthen environmental monitoring functions. So in recent years, the role and function of regional offices of the ministry have been widened both to process environmental approvals and monitor compliance of legally mandated safeguards during project construction, operation, and closure. So you can see that over the time, somewhat the burden, or you can say the has been widened actually related to the of the regional offices of the ministry itself. So therefore, as a result, such widened roles require additional funding and infrastructure support, but it remains unclear if such support has been provided or not. Fine. So decentralized infrastructure जो है, that is essential of course for this respective 19 regional offices, as it increases the accessibility to regulators and can potentially enhance legal enforcement. Fine. Also, a suggestion is given, that is an internal mechanism to review whether the offices are able to prioritize their actions in such a way that they don't disproportionately favor any regulatory outcomes while upholding the environmental protection without compromising social justice. So these are the actually suggestions or the points which ministry should keep in mind while bringing any kind of changes or merger and so on. Fine. So therefore, this is the U-turn actually, that finally the ministry has dropped the plan of merging these four bodies. Next is related to the Bihar government actually conducting the caste-based this survey census, you can say, which actually at the national level was has been this caste-based survey has been undertaken only once, and that too in the 2011, but उसका डेटा जो है वो गवर्नमेंट ने पब्लिक डोमेन में नहीं रखा था, ठीक है, बिकॉज ऑफ वेगनेस एंड टेक्निकलिटीज. फाइन. सो हो क्या रहा है कि पहले पटना हाई कोर्ट जो है उसने रोक लगा दी थी इस सर्वे पे, फिर बाद में पटना हाई कोर्ट ने उसे स्टे को वैकेट कर दिया, मींस जो रोक लगाई थी उसको हटा लिया. एंड अब कुछ पेटिशनर्स हैं जिन्होंने चैलेंज किया इस पटना हाई कोर्ट की जजमेंट को, एंड इवन दिस सर्वे ऑफ बिहार गवर्नमेंट इटसेल्फ की वो ये लोग ये कह रहे हैं पेटिशनर जो जिन्होंने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में केस फाइल किया है, जिसकी हियरिंग की कल होनी है, ठीक है, 18 अगस्त इटसेल्फ. यस. सो इन लोग का ये कहना है कि कहीं ना कहीं ये जो अथॉरिटी है फॉर दिस कास्ट बेस्ड सर्विस को कंडक्ट करने की, वो सेंट्रल के पास है, ना कि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के पास. इस बेसिस पे ये बात कर रहे हैं, उसको हम देखते हैं. तो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द कास्ट बेस्ड सर्वे? सो कास्ट बेस्ड सर्वे की जैसे एक पॉपुलेशन सेंसस होता है इंडिया में 2011, नाउ 2021 में होना था, बट अब नेक्स्ट ईयर तक कंप्लीट हो पाएगा बिकॉज ऑफ कोविड एंड ऑल. सो उसी तरह से कास्ट बेस्ड सर्वे की प्रोविजन की की जाती है कि इससे पता लगता है कि ऑफ कोर्स इंडिया में जितनी पॉपुलेशन है उसमें डिफरेंट कास्ट लेयर्स में कैसे डिवाइडेड है, फिर डिफरेंट कास्ट. So therefore, on January 7, the state government of Bihar launched a 2-phase caste survey in Bihar, stating that detailed information on socio-economic conditions would help create better government policies for disadvantaged groups. The survey is estimated to collect the socio-economic data for population of 12.70 crore in the 38 districts of Bihar. The first phase of the survey, which involved a house listing exercise, was carried out from this in the January month itself. And the state was in the middle of the second phase when the survey was actually halted due to the stay order from the High Court on May 4. But later on, the High Court has vacated its this, and by High Court gave the state government of Bihar the green signal to go ahead with this survey, continue with the survey. So on August 2, the state government has resumed the work on the second phase of the survey. In the second phase, the data related to caste, subcaste, religions of all people is to be collected, and the final survey is likely to be the final survey report is likely to be presented in the month of September, that is next year. Remember not to forget that this is less than a year before the 2024 elections. Fine. So parties को ये भी होता है कि कहीं ना कहीं इससे हमारे को फायदा हो रहा है, बट अपोजिशन को ये भी होता है कि नहीं, इससे नुकसान भी हो सकता है. So this can be one of the political motive as well, more or less political motive ही है. So why the need for a caste census? The census conducted at the beginning of every decade does not record any caste data other than for those listed as scheduled caste. So यहाँ से एक important fact ये है कि जो हमारी census conduct होती है every 10 years, उसमें कहीं भी caste को include नहीं किया जाता. Remember, caste related आपसे questions नहीं पूछे जाते, but except for the SCs, that is scheduled caste. In the absence of such a census, there is no proper estimate for the population of the OBCs, other backward caste in the country. So various groups within the OBCs. Fine. There are lots of thousands of caste actually comes under OBC itself. Fine. So despite this ambiguity, the union government has categorically ruled out conducting a socio-economic caste census, saying it is unfeasible, administratively difficult, and cumbersome. Fine. So एक महाराष्ट्र स्टेट ऑफ महाराष्ट्र जो है, इसने पिटीशन फाइल की थी इन सुप्रीम कोर्ट. सो उसके रिप्लाई में सेंटर ने अपने एफिडेविट में ये कहा था कि इट इज कमर्सम एंड डिफिकल्ट टू एक्चुअली कंडक्ट एनी in its affidavit said that excluding any caste other than the SCs and scheduled tribes, even there was a conscious policy decision adopted since 1951 census, and that there was a policy of official discouragement of caste. तो हम जैसे कहते हैं कि कास्ट क्लास बेस्ड डिस्क्रिमिनेशन खत्म होनी चाहिए, तो सरकार ने भी यही कहा कि ऑफिशियल पॉलिसी जो रही है सरकार, नॉट जस्ट द करंट गवर्नमेंट बट सिंस 1951 इज ऑफ to discourage the such kind of caste based census, that is official discouragement of caste. And therefore the union government in 2011 had undertaken a survey of caste through the socio-economic caste census of 2011. However, the collected raw data of nearly 130 crore of Indians was never made public due to flaws in the data itself. Fine. So political analysts ये कहते हैं कि कहीं ना कहीं जो current बिहार गवर्नमेंट की मूव है, that is a way for coalition parties to counter the current government, BJP led government, Hindutva politics, with the revival of मंडल politics. Now what exactly is मंडल? तो वीपी सिंह की सरकार जो थी 1990 में, उन्होंने एक कमेटी कॉन्स्टिट्यूट की थी अंडर वीपी मंडल, वीपी सिंह की सरकार ने सेंटर में, ठीक है। सो वीपी मंडल के अंडर एक कमीशन कॉन्स्टिट्यूट की थी, इसी को हम कहते हैं मंडल कमीशन। एंड द रोल द aim of this, you can say, commission was to actually study about the OBC population, ठीक है। तो रिपोर्ट में इन्होंने ये कहा था कि रिकमेंड किया था 27% reservation for the other backward classes, but in 1992 with the Supreme Court ruling in Indira Sawne versus Other versus Union of India 1992, इसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बड़ी फेमस जजमेंट है, याद रखना, इंदिरा सोने वर्सेस अदर्स वर्सेस यूनियन ऑफ इंडिया। इसमें ये कहा था कि आप जितनी मर्जी रिजर्वेशन दो, बट वो रिजर्वेशन 50% से ज्यादा नहीं होनी चाहिए, ब्रीच नहीं करनी चाहिए, क्योंकि जनरल लोग भी हैं, जनरल, ठीक है। सो कास्ट वाज एन एक्सेप्टेबल इंडिकेटर ऑफ बैकवर्डनेस, ये माना था। एंड द रिकमेंडेशंस ऑफ द मंडल कमीशन वर फाइनली इंप्लीमेंटेड in 1992. So the Mandal Commission estimated the OBC population at 52%. However, it is debatable whether estimates hold true today or not. Opposition parties have continued to demand a caste census, saying that such an exercise is necessary to streamline welfare politics. कि आप better streamline कर सकते हो अपनी welfare policies को, so that कि आप उसी पे focus करते हो जहाँ पे actually target उस population को करते हो जिसको जो backward है, जिसको reservation की जरूरत है. Now why it has been challenged? तो petitioners ने क्या कहा है? Petitioners in Supreme Court, they are saying that order notifying the survey is unconstitutional since only the center is exclusively authorized to conduct a census under the constitution. First point of challenge. Second is, they also point out that the state government does not have any independent power to appoint district magistrates and local authorities for collecting data without a notification under section 3 of the Census Act 1948 by the center. So this is the second point of on the basis of which they have challenged this survey itself. However, the AC verdict has also been assailed on the ground that it violates the Puttaswamy judgment as it permits the collection of personal data by the state under an executive order. So this is a third point or ground of challenge by the petitioners of this survey. Fine. So this is what Puttaswamy judgment है, right to privacy. So उसकी भी violation कहीं ना कहीं कह रहे हैं कि executive order के through हो रही है, rather ये state assembly से एक proper provision या central government को notify करना चाहिए था. So these are all the points of contentions or the ground for opposing or filing petition in the Supreme Court. कल इस पे सुनवाई होनी है, जो भी निकल के आता है हम उस पे टैप रखेंगे, ठीक है। सेंटर ने एक ड्राफ्ट एसओपी दैट इज स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ प्रोसीजर रिलीज की है एंड ये कहा है कि वांट्स द कोर्ट्स टू एक्सरसाइज रिस्ट्रेंट। होता क्या है, सपोज कि जैसे आप लोग देखते होंगे कि ऑफिशियल्स ought to be summoned only in exceptional circumstances। होता क्या है कि रूटीन में जो कोर्ट्स है इंडिया में कई बार क्या करती है, हाई कोर्ट इवन सुप्रीम कोर्ट तो कम ही करती है, हाई कोर्ट ज्यादा है डिस्ट्रिक्ट से, दे एक्चुअली समन द ऑफिशियल्स, इवन एट टाइम्स दे समन द डीजीपी इटसेल्फ। तो गवर्नमेंट ने ये कहा कि इसको थोड़ा कोर्ट को रिस्ट्रेंट फॉलो करना चाहिए, ठीक है, कहीं ना कहीं, एंड ऑफिशियल्स ought to be summoned only in exceptional circumstances and not as a routine affair, ठीक है। सो गवर्नमेंट ने इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये एसओपी रिलीज की है, ठीक है। ओडिशा गवर्नमेंट ने विथड्रॉ कर लिया अपनी कंट्रोवर्शियल डिम्ड फॉरेस्ट ऑर्डर को, जो हमने कल देखा था कि कल कहा था कि नहीं अब कोई डिम्ड फॉरेस्ट नहीं है ओडिशा में, बट फाइनली अपने ऑर्डर को रिवोक कर लिया। सो डिम्ड फॉरेस्ट होते क्या, आर द फॉरेस्ट दैट आरंट क्लासिफाइड सो बाय द सेंटर ऑफ द स्टेट्स इन देयर रिकॉर्ड्स, ठीक है। हमने गोडा बर्मन जजमेंट की बात की थी, ऑलरेडी हम डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, सो नो नीड टू गो बैक टू दैट, बिकॉज उसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा था कि जो फॉरेस्ट की डेफिनेशन है वो डिक्शनरी डेफिनेशन होनी चाहिए होगी, ठीक है। Next, this is important, very important. In fact, this scheme, Vishwakarma scheme, will aid 30 lakh artisans families. This is very important scheme for the prelims exam. Remember, there are lots of information in this smaller article itself. So the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs finally cleared this scheme yesterday with the provisions of letters 13,000 crore. हुआ क्या था कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने फ्रॉम द रैम्पर्ट्स ऑफ इटसेल्फ रेड फोर्ट डिक्लेयर किया था कि हम कुछ ऐसी इस तरह की स्कीम लाएंगे फॉर द क्राफ्ट्स पीपल एंड द आर्टिसंस, ट्रेडिशनल आर्टिसंस, ठीक है। सो दिस स्कीम विल बी अवेलेबल फॉर द ट्रेडिशनल क्राफ्ट्स पीपल एंड आर्टिसंस फ्रॉम 2023-24 to 27-28 फॉर कंप्लीट 5 years. The center said in a release that the scheme aims to actually strengthen and nurture the Guru Shishya Parampara that is teaches students tradition or the family based practice of traditional skills by artisans and crafts people working with their hands and tools. The second aim of this scheme is the scheme also aims at improving the quality as well as the reach of this quality and reach of the products and services of the artisans and craftspeople, and to ensure that the Vishwakarmas are integrated with the domestic and global value chain. So Vishwakarmas किसको कहा गया है? इनको craftspeople and traditional जो ये आर्टिसंस हैं इनको. इसके अंडर 18 ट्रेडिशनल ट्रेड्स जो है उनको शामिल किया गया है. ठीक है, एज ये सब देख सकते हो, आर्मर, कारपेंटर, बोट मेकर एंड एक्सेट्रा, washerman, tailor and fishing net maker will all means in total 18 traditional trades को इसमें शामिल किया गया है. That will be covered under this scheme. Artisans and craftspeople will get PM Vishwakarma certificate and ID card. Credit support भी दी जाएगी up to 1 lakh in the first tranche and up to 2 lakh in the second tranche and at a concessional interest rate of 5%. ठीक है, कि लोन जो मिलेगी वो 5% के रेट पे मिलेगी. ठीक है, सो लोन दिया जाएगा कितने? 5% इंटरेस्ट रेट पे इनको, कंसेशनल रेट्स पे. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट जो स्किलिंग जो है, देयर विल बी 2 टाइप्स ऑफ स्किलिंग अंडर दिस प्रोग्राम, बेसिक एंड एडवांस्ड. अंडर दिस स्कीम अंडर स्टाइपेंड भी पे किया जाएगा. स्टाइपेंड ऑफ 500 पर डे विल आल्सो बी प्रोवाइडेड टू द बेनिफिशियरीज व्हाइल अंडरगोइंग स्किल ट्रेनिंग. ठीक है, एंड इन टोटल ऑलमोस्ट 30 लाख फैमिलीज विल बी कवर्ड अंडर दिस स्कीम ओवर 5 years. ठीक है, so again a very important scheme you can say from the exam point of view especially. Okay, moving to the next. UGC ने यूनिवर्सिटी ग्रांट कमीशन ने स्टैंडर्डाइज पीजी कोर्सेज इन स्टडी ऑफ मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स एक कमेटी बनाई है. आपको पता होना चाहिए कि इस कमेटी को लीड कौन कर रहा है, मेंबर्स कितने हैं. ठीक है, so manuscriptology, UGC has formed a panel to develop model syllabus for courses in manuscriptology and paleography in colleges and university across the country. Manuscriptology होती क्या है? It's a study of history and literature through the use of handwritten documents, while paleography is the study of ancient writing systems. 11-member panel appoint किया है UGC ने, that will be headed by Prafulla Mishra, former director of National Mission for Manuscripts. ठीक है, so आपको पता होना चाहिए कि इसको हेड कौन कर रहा है. सबके नाम याद रखने की जरूरत नहीं है, 11 लोगों की, बस ये ध्यान रखना कि इसको हेड कौन कर रहा है. फाइन, सो दिस वाज एक्चुअली कॉन्स्टिट्यूटेड ऑन द रिकमेंडेशंस ऑफ द नेशनल मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट मिशन, दिस नेशनल मिशन फॉर मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट इटसेल्फ, व्हिच हैज एक्चुअली रिटन टू द UGC to come up with such or constitute such kind of panel, and therefore UGC has finally constituted it. Fine. Another additional information is, according to NMM, that is National Mission for Manuscripts, India possesses an estimate of 10 million manuscripts in 18 ancient scripts, while 75% of the manuscripts are in Sanskrit, 25% are in regional languages. So ये fact भी आपको पता होना चाहिए, कई बार स्टेटमेंट क्वेश्चन फॉर्म में बन के आ जाता है ये. ठीक है, सेंटर एंड WHO, another important from today's discussion itself, जो कि एक और क्वेश्चन बनने का चांस है. सेंटर एंड WHO टू लॉन्च ग्लोबल इनिशिएटिव ऑन डिजिटल हेल्थ है, ध्यान रखना. ठीक है, एंड नॉट जस्ट दिस, इसमें दो एक और एडिशनल इंफॉर्मेशन है, ये कि सेंटर एंड ADB. ठीक है, सेंटर एंड ADB जो है, दैट इज हेल्थ इनिशिएटिव इन इंडिया, सेटिंग अप अ क्लाइमेट एंड हेल्थ इनिशिएटिव इन इंडिया इन कोलैबोरेशन विद द एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक. ठीक है, तो दो इनिशिएटिव इसके अंडर, एक WHO के साथ इंडियन गवर्नमेंट दैट इज हेल्थ मिनिस्ट्री इनिशिएटिव लॉन्च कर रही है, दैट इज ग्लोबल इनिशिएटिव ऑन डिजिटल हेल्थ. द अनदर स्कीम और द इनिशिएटिव व्हिच इज टू बी अंडरटेकन बाय द हेल्थ मिनिस्ट्री, एंड दैट इज विद द ADB, एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक, एंड द नेम ऑफ द सेम इज क्लाइमेट एंड हेल्थ इनिशिएटिव इन इंडिया. सो दीज आर टू डिफरेंट थिंग्स. फाइन, सो 2 questions. Finally, we have this world page, not that important, you can see only violence and all. फाइन, हाँ, एक एडिशनल इंफॉर्मेशन ये है कि यहाँ पे जर्मनी ओकेस कंट्रोल्ड यूज ऑफ कैनबिस. ठीक है, सो कैनबिस की यूज को इन ए कंट्रोल लिमिटेड मैनर अलाउ कर दिया है. टेक्सटाइल एक्सपोर्ट्स कंटिन्यू टू डिक्लाइन ओवर टाइम. and in what sense? So you can see total of $1663 million हमने शिप की थी लास्ट मंथ कंपेयर्ड विद 1695 मिलियन इन जुलाई, मीन्स उससे पिछले महीने में जुलाई एंड अगस्त दिस फिगर है हमारे पास, ठीक है। तो समवॉट आप देख सकते हो कि कहीं ना कहीं इसमें गिरावट दर्ज की गई है फ्रॉम 1695 मिलियन डॉलर्स टू 1663 मिलियन, मीन्स समवॉट आपको गिरावट दिख रही है, ठीक है। ओके, so finally we have landed on the sports page. That's it. As far as there are lots of stops today to discuss editorials and miscellaneous facts as well, but important ones, remember, from the exam point of view. So that's it as far as today's Hindu is concerned. But before we stop, finally we have questions from the today's analysis itself. So quickly have a look at it and try to solve the same. We'll be discussing this tomorrow. Fine. So here are your questions. First, consider the following statement regarding विश्वकर्मा PM विश्वकर्मा scheme itself, ठीक है। इसको सॉल्व करने की कोशिश करना, कल हम इसको डिस्कस करेंगे। एंड सेकंड इज रिलेटेड टू कास्ट सेंसस इन बिहार, दैट इज द बिहार गवर्नमेंट्स ऑर्डर नोटिफाइंग द कास्ट बेस्ड सर्वे इज अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल सिंस ओनली द सेंटर इज एक्सक्लूसिवली ऑथराइज्ड टू कंडक्ट अ सेंसस अंडर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन। यू नीड टू क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन दिस स्टेटमेंट, फाइन, फॉर 10 marker in 150 words. So that's it from my side for the day. If you have any query, anything, you can put the same in the comment section. Until then, take care, keep revising, and stay tuned for tomorrow's Hindu analysis. Thank you. But do not forget to solve these questions. Okay? Thank you.